To understand that during grad school that the interest is building is really important.
Unlike undergraduate loans, in which interest can be deferred until graduation, interest starts occurring immediately.
I graduated without taking any student loans out because of how focused I was, how many scholarships I had, and how aggressively I saved. Welcome back to the Fiscal Clinician Podcast, where we empower healthcare professionals to build wealth, crush debt, and achieve financial independence. I'm your host, Josh Sheen.
And I'm Devon McCord, your co-host. We're both physical therapists and financial coaches, and we're on a mission to help students and healthcare professionals take control of their money and live a debt-free lifestyle.
In this episode, we will be talking about how to succeed with your finances before and during graduate school. We're going to dive into navigating student loans, budgeting strategies, scholarships, and how to set yourself up for success after graduation. And don't worry, we're going to sprinkle a little budget hacks and real life tips in along the way.
And we both thought it was important to separate these time frames because during graduate school, you might have little to no income, but after graduation, you'll start earning a real paycheck. And with that real paycheck comes bigger responsibilities and opportunities for financial growth.
Before we jump in, if you're listening to this and thinking, I wish someone could just help me map this out of what this is going to look like, that's exactly what we do in our one-on-one coaching sessions. And so you can book a free 15-minute consult in the link in the description, or if you go to fiscalclinician.com, you could book from there. And so let's start with some recent news impacting the loan process for healthcare professionals. And recent changes in loan regulations have thrown quite the curveball for healthcare providers, and especially for those professionals looking to enter into the healthcare field. There's a new cap on borrowing for these types of professionals, and it definitely changes things quite a bit, doesn't it, Devon?
Absolutely, Josh. With the lifetime cap of $100,000 for graduate students and a $200,000 cap for professional students, many are going to feel this impact. Plus, the discontinuation of Grad PLUS loans in 2026 is quite alarming. It directly affects how students finance their education.
Yeah, and especially since physical therapy, occupational therapy, and nursing, I think speech language pathology as well, these were all left out of the federal definition of a professional degree, which is a big deal mostly because of our access to loans for school. And so many aspiring nurses and therapists now face uncertainty regarding some loan options. It is hilarious, though. I think everybody took this as like a personal blow, everyone in healthcare, because the content that's getting put out because of these professional and non-professional degrees is hilarious. You know, these fields are no longer considered professional. And so there's these videos of like nurses or PT documenting, and it shows their note, and it just is like, patient looks good, patient is fine. Because they're like, if I'm not a professional, then this is what you're getting, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely remember my first, a year as a student intern, and I remember we're still on paper documentation, and the SOAP note was subjective is patient is 5 out of 10 pain. Objective, pain improved from 5 to 4 out of 10. Assessment, patient tolerated treatment well. Plan, continue PT. And it's like, well, maybe we probably should just go back to that if it doesn't really matter about how we write up our notes anymore because we're no longer professionals, right? So yeah, it's going to be some interesting times. And, this reclassification could limit educational access and further worsen workforce shortages in the essential healthcare fields.
Yeah. And so other things that will change, and these are all set to take effect July 1st of 2026. It could change at this time anyway. That's what it looks like. And so Grad PLUS loans will also end July 1st of 2026. PT, OT, nursing, and SLPs, speech language pathology, were not explicitly included in this federal definition of a professional degree. And so it affects loan limits, borrowing caps, and potentially increases costs for students in critical healthcare fields. But there's always pros and cons of these things. People, it is hilarious because people just went crazy on all the cons of this, right? First, we want to talk about, are there any changes for current providers? And honestly, there's not any huge changes for current providers. It doesn't really change how we treat our patients, what we do. And I know it's easy to lean into the bitterness and resentment of like, oh, you're not considering us professionals. But I think really the reason they're changing the categorization is just to change how the loans are distributed, essentially. But I think at the end of the day, it just lean into doing our best and continuing to go on as professionals. I mean, we are professional careers, right? It's just from a financial loan standpoint, we're not grouped into that. So
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. And we both think it's important, to maintain a positive and hopeful attitude about this current situation. Because on the bright side, this cap may ultimately force the colleges to lower their tuitions because students no longer want to apply and no longer can afford the loans. And if they can't take out the money that they need to pay for school, they may just not go to school. And how does this like really affect the current students? Well, current students already enrolled are grandfathered in, so their loans will not change. Basically, if you enroll in a school before July 2026, your loans should not change. If you're enrolling after July 2026, as of this recording, this is when they are going to take effect. And everything right now is kind of still in the draft phase language, and it could still change before or after being finalized.
So make sure to double check all the details of what we're saying because things could change by the time that it actually gets finalized. But some possible pros, there's no longer going to be an unlimited amount of money to borrow. It kind of sucks right now because the graduate schools, they can kind of take advantage of the fact that there's no cap on being able to borrow. And so they can just charge ridiculous rates for PT school, OT school. If these schools want to survive and all of this truly takes effect, they're probably going to have to lower the cost of tuition in theory in order to make these schools survive. From this, there could be less student loans, less overall debt in general from these programs, and those could be some great positives. Obviously, some cons. There's going to be, if these changes occur, inability for students to afford schools. Hopefully not, but there could be like an exodus of people leaving the pursuit of healthcare because they just don't have enough money or can't take out enough loans to afford the programs. And in a world where we already have shortages of PTs, OTs, and nurses, it gets kind of rough. The other bad thing that could happen is people continue to go to school and they end up just taking out private loans in order to afford the school. And usually with private loans, you have a lot higher interest rates. So if you guys can stay away from private student loans, that's definitely the way to go and trying to stay federal. And we'll talk about some more strategies later. And before we dive into the nitty gritty of loans, scholarships, and budgeting, remember, if you want personalized guidance on your graduate school finances, Devon and I offer one-on-one consultations. And so you can schedule a free consult session with us in the description below or at fiscalclinician.com.
And even a short session can give you some clarity and save you thousands of dollars in interest and stress down the line. So don't wait until after graduation. Let's start helping you plan right now. And moving on to our next segment, we're going to break down the main types of graduate loans and how they work.
Yeah, and before we even start the loans, we want to give you kind of an order of operations because not all dollars are equal. The first couple of things we want you to look at are scholarships, grants, and free money because anything you can get in this area is going to take down the amount of loans you're going to have at the end. The second thing we want you to look at is employer tuition assistance or TA positions through the graduate program that you're going to. During my time as a graduate student, I applied. I unfortunately didn't get it, but I applied for a program that basically would have cut my tuition in half and then also would have given me a stipend for food and housing. And that would have majorly changed how I paid off my school. If you're taking out loans, you want to start with the federal direct unsubsidized loans. And then if you still don't have enough money to pay for school, that's when, for now, you go to the Grad PLUS loans if absolutely necessary. The last resort, and we really urge you to try to avoid this if possible, is taking out private student loans. Again, they're going to be a lot higher interest, so generally try to leave these alone if possible. And this order alone can save you tens of thousands of dollars over your career in your graduate school. And so, Devon, let's dive into some specifics on these loans.
The first one is going to be federal or direct unsubsidized loans. So the big thing to note is that interest rates start when you take out the loan for graduate level loans, unlike undergraduate loans in which interest can be deferred until graduation. So for these loans, students can borrow up to $20,500 per year. Interest starts occurring immediately. There's no pause while you're in school. You can pay the interest while in school to avoid it being added to your loan balance. And furthermore, we still have the option of Grad PLUS loans, which cover the rest of your tuition and fees if your unsubsidized loan isn't enough. Interest also occurs immediately with the Grad PLUS loan with a higher rate, and it usually requires a credit check for the application. And so the key difference from undergraduate versus graduate loans is graduate loans don't have subsidized options. And this means interest never stops occurring while you're in school.
I think to understand that during grad school that the interest is building is really important, but it hasn't been added to your loan yet. And we'll explain what this means. So after you graduate, that unpaid interest can get added to your total balance. So let's say, for example, you take out a total of $100,000 loans at a 7% interest rate during your time in school. This would result in about $7,000 per year in interest, just because 7% of 100,000. During school, you would only pay interest on that $100,000. However, once you graduate after school, you start paying on both the 100,000 and on the interest that money has accumulated over the 3 years in school. So once you graduate, you'd be paying interest on the full $121,000 because that's the 7,000 for 3 years plus the original $100,000 balance.
Yeah, and that's called capitalization. And once it happens, you start paying interest on a bigger number. So if you could at least pay off the interest during school, this is an ideal financial goal to begin with.
Yeah, so let's talk a little more about navigating the loan process. It can feel really overwhelming just figuring out what the heck all these loans mean, but tools like ChatGPT and AI can really simplify the research options.
We both feel searching for a scholarship should be treated like a part-time job during or prior to grad school at this point. And in order to save time while applying, we recommend using some AI prompts with the following scripts. So if you're looking for like the hidden program finder prompt, type this into ChatGPT. Find lesser known grants, subsidies, reimbursements, or public funds in the specific state that I am qualifying for during graduate school. Summarize requirements and provide direct application links. Another one for the application assistant prompt, type this into ChatGPT. Write a professional email requesting information or applying for specific loan grants. Keep email short and sweet, under 200 words, friendly, clear, and formal.
Anything you can do to make your life a little easier and save some time is amazing. And guys, every dollar of scholarship or free money reduces the loans that you need. And so Devon's going to talk about some concrete strategies specifically for healthcare students as far as scholarships to look for.
Yeah, so first things first is like the targeted scholarships, meaning we're going to look at PT, OT, or nursing specific scholarships through the professional associations, APTA, AOTA, or American Nurses Association. Many of these professional associations can offer $1,000 to $5,000 awards annually. The next one you can look at are state or program grants. So some states offer grants for students committing to work in underserved areas after graduation. And these you'll want to check with your state's health or educational department. Furthermore is the employer tuition assistance. So in this example, if you work part-time in healthcare during school, ask your employer about tuition reimbursement. It's essentially free money for your education. They assist with loan repayment as long as you remain an employer of the company.
All great options, man. And another tool that I used a decent amount when I was in graduate school is called Scholly or Scholly.com. And it's a great resource for filtering through scholarships. You can filter by program, PT, OT, etc., nursing. And I got several thousands of dollars worth of scholarships and grants using this platform. So I think one thing to understand about the scholarships is you don't want to apply for one or two and then be like, dang it, I didn't get any, right? We're talking like applying to 20, 50, 100. And then if you can only get a couple of those, it's still several $1,000s, right? So don't get discouraged when you're not getting every scholarship, because even if you do 50 or 100 and get a couple, the amount of time you spent versus the amount of money that you received is amazing ROI or return on investment. And so, Devon, what are some other tips to make sure we're not overpaying for graduate school?
So some common tips for navigating loans is you want to consider in-state versus out-of-state tuition considerations. In-state's usually cheaper, so you kind of want to start with looking at those programs first, so you're not paying those overly expensive out-of-state tuition costs. And again, we want to remind everyone that you should be choosing a school that fits your budget. Employers generally don't care which school you attended, so you don't want to really pay for that fancy Ivy League school, because ultimately your PT, once you're out of school, you have a license and you're going to be easy hire because we're in such demand still. And furthermore, you want to definitely research all these schools and their PT tuition costs. Look for schools with lower tuition that also have a great MPTE board pass rate. We're looking for usually 85 to 90% first time pass rate if possible. And also make sure that the school is accredited and not pending accreditation.
Yeah. I wanted to focus and highlight on the lack of importance with what school you go to. Again, make sure the board pass rate is good. I can't remember exactly how much he paid for PT school. Mine was about 85 grand. And we were working alongside people in the same job who paid over $200,000 for their degree. So guys, please don't be that person. Like, we want you guys to succeed, but don't pay that much money to do it, because you're just going to be wrestling with debt for a long time. We also just want to give you a simple rule of thumb. So as a general guideline, we want you guys to try to avoid graduating with more student loan debt than your expected first year salary. So for example, if you expect to make around $60,000 per month after taxes, and this is around the national average for a starting PT as a new grad, then borrowing $120,000 should be a major red flag, regardless of how prestigious sounding the program is, right? Because you're borrowing double what you're going to be making. Now, I realize the average school cost for PT school is around 100 to 130,000. That's the national average right now. And this is why those scholarships and those TA positions are so incredibly important, because they can cut thousands of dollars off your tuition so you can get much closer to your starting salary amount. So let's use an example. Let's say the PT school you went to was $110,000. You grind and you're able to get about $10,000 in scholarships and grants, and you continue to work throughout those 3 years, and you're able to cash flow around $15,000 worth of PT school. Now your loans are at $85,000 instead of $110,000, and this is much closer to what your starting PT salary is going to be. This might seem lofty, but again, my school was about 85 grand. I was able to work really hard before and during school. I graduated without taking any student loans out because of how focused I was, how many scholarships I had, and how aggressively I saved.
Yeah, I probably had $30,000 to my name prior to going into PT school. And I basically paid my first trimester, which was $15,000 right off the bat. And I did that basically to create pressure to succeed and make sure that I do get through school, because otherwise that first trimester, if I flunk out, that's $15,000 down the drain, right? So that really provided me with some clarity on financial priorities and maintaining the budget mindset while being in school.
Yeah, that's a good point we didn't talk about before. Then you have the subset of people that start school and then don't finish. And it's not a super high percentage. But again, if you're doing the most you can to prevent taking out the most loans possible, if for some reason you didn't make it, then at least you're cutting your losses very minimally, as opposed to taking out these huge loans and wrestling with it for a long time because you didn't get through. I mean, that's such a heavy burden to carry, you know? And so don't wait until you're making more money. Start now, okay? Let's talk about some budget saving strategies you guys could use during graduate school. So Devon, what do we got?
Budgeting during school, very, very crucial. Here are some questions to consider when you're developing your budget for PT school. So one of the first questions is, how will you save on living arrangements? So this can be like living with roommates, or maybe you plan to commute from your home, from your parents' residence. Also living close to campus as a means to save time, gas, and food, and etc. And another question to ask yourself is, what tools will you use to track rent and expenses? Josh and I both like the EveryDollar app because it's free. So you can develop your own budget in Excel, which is also free, or you can use Monarch app that is a paid app as well. Another question to ask yourself is, are you going to cook meals from home or use a meal plan? And this is where we always feel that cooking can save you hundreds of dollars during school. And that ultimately can help you pay down your interest during school, right? And the last question to consider is definitely consider part-time work or TA positions to offset tuition costs. TA position that you basically apply for can help pay for much of the school costs, and you're also learning and teaching, so you're constantly kind of studying at the same time, which I think is really cool. But if that doesn't work out, maybe those are very competitive for you, consider taking some on-demand jobs like Uber and Uber Eats, DoorDash. So you're basically still in control of your study time, and you can separate your study time with making a little bit of money on the side.
I love that idea. Among my many side hustles during PT school, DoorDash was one of them, and I caddied as well. Like Devon said, tracking your expenses is hugely important. You need to find some kind of system, even if it's free. I currently use the Monarch app. That's about $100 a year. I love it, but if you're not wanting to spend right now, that makes sense. There's lots of free options. And food, housing, and transportation choices all play a huge role in how much you're going to be spending towards school. That's one of the reasons I was able to cash flow school a lot more easily, is because I either lived with a family friend near the school or I commuted from home, because during COVID times, everything got kind of wild. And so again, just consider these often overlooked expenses that we talked about, and also consider having an emergency fund. Even just $500 to $1,000, having that saved can prevent a high interest debt when unexpected costs pop up. And it's really not about if the costs will pop up, but when.
Yeah, exactly. And just to be clear, this emergency fund is for things like car repairs, medical expenses, or unexpected school costs.
Usually recommend keeping this in a simple high yield savings account or a separate savings account, just so it's accessible but not tempting to spend on whatever you want. And so if you're trying to figure out an emergency fund or exactly what that is, check out our in-depth dive of emergency funds in our episode 4 podcast for more details. Now, a couple other things to consider is health insurance. Check if your school provides coverage or if you need your own plan. If you're 27 or older, then that might be something you need to consider. If you're younger, that might not be an issue. And then the other thing is licensing and board exams. These do cost money. I think we got one or two free practice exams with our tuition costs through my school, but then I ended up purchasing more practice exams. And then, study materials, and then the actual board exam is, I don't know, I think it was like $500 or $600 when we took it. And so plan for these expenses, because they are coming and they will come. To wrap things up today, biggest takeaway is graduate school finances don't have to be overwhelming if you're intentional. I feel like so much of money is just being intentional instead of letting life happen to you. And the decisions that you make before and during school matter far more than trying to fix things and repair things later.
And you don't need perfect conditions or a massive income. You need a plan. That means choosing an affordable program, minimizing how much you borrow, paying interest when you can, and being disciplined with your lifestyle while you're in school.
And every dollar you guys save or avoid borrowing now gives you more freedom after graduation. And so whether it's scholarships, working part-time, budgeting intentionally, or just being aware of how interest works, these small decisions compound in a really huge way.
And remember, this isn't about being perfect, it's about being proactive. If you start planning early, you put yourself in a position to graduate with options instead of stress.
Yeah, in the next episode, we're going to shift gears and talk about what happens after graduation. How do we approach student loan repayment, avoid lifestyle inflation, and build a clear financial game plan as a new healthcare professional starting out in your career?
So if today's episode was helpful to you or resonates with you, please share it with a classmate or friend in grad school. And if you want help creating a personalized plan, you could book a one-on-one session with Josh and I using the link in the description.
Yeah, well, thanks for tuning in, guys, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Fiscal Clinician Podcast.